Good morning, beloved. Peace be with you. Today in our gospel, we see a short example of Jesus giving an invitation to discipleship here. And just want to point out a few things that are easy to gloss over. The first is that we know it's invitation to discipleship because Jesus is talking to the crowds, not to disciples, right? So we always want to pay attention. Who is he talking to? Is he talking to the 12, talking to the inner three, Peter, James, and John? Is he talking to his apostles, his disciples, or the crowd? Just all these followers. Remember, the crowds are the ones who have not yet committed to him. They're following from a distance, they're watching, they're listening a little bit, but they haven't committed their life. They're not saying, yeah, I want you to be my teacher, and I'll be your disciple. And so Jesus is inviting them to come to me. All you who labor and are burdened, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon from you and learn from me. That's how you know it's an invitation to discipleship. Come and take my instruction and learn from me. Be my disciple. We have to always remember, being a disciple of Jesus means that we are trying to conform our life to be like his and pattern our life after his life, which means at some point we have to be doing what he does and not just only listening to instruction, but actually putting it into practice in our life so that the disciple becomes just like the master. And and look at this. So first, it's an invitation to come and to rest. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. The rest is usually always connected with the Sabbath rest that God promises. And the Sabbath rest, that once a week rest, is always connected with preparation for eternal rest. And so the rest is not just sitting back watching TV. The rest is literally a restful communion with God. It's a time of. That's why we also say, Sabbath day is a family day. It's a day with our biological families, because that is preparing us for that eternal rest with our heavenly family. So it's all about this communal relationship, family, rest, life together. So Jesus is basically saying, come to me and rest and commune with me and be in relationship with me. And you will truly feel and experience rest, renewal, rejuvenation. So this is interesting too, because remember Jesus with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes, he always kind of gets into it with them because he is working on the Sabbath day of rest, right? And yet their idea of Sabbath rest is not really restful, because you have to, you're so busy worrying about not breaking the Sabbath rest that you're not actually resting. Literally on the Sabbath rest, you can only walk so fast. And you can only walk so many steps. And so if something is beyond those amount of steps, you can't go do that on the Sabbath. And if there was an emergency, you can't run on the Sabbath, because running is not resting. You can't cook on the Sabbath. There's all these little things that you'd be worried about. I don't want to break this. It's almost like, now this is not really a jab, but it's almost like trying to celebrate the old Latin Mass for the priest. You don't know this probably, but the old instructions actually literally say the priest if he misses one thing or does anything wrong and misses even just one little sign of the cross wrong, it's a mortal sin for him. That's what it says in there. And there's 500 million little crosses you have to do, all these little places. Now, does that sound like worship and rest and commune with God? No, the poor priest is so worried about doing everything perfectly and saying the right words in Latin perfectly and doing this little sign of the cross here and make sure he bows here and tips his hat over here and does this little thing, because he don't get in mortal sin, right? That's not rest. It's the same. That's just one example of basically what Jesus was facing. And he's trying to say, okay, all that is not the Sabbath rest that God designed from the beginning. Come to me and I'll show you the rest that God designed for us from the beginning. So that's the first invitation. You can imagine that's not going to go over well with the Pharisees, scribes, Sadducees, and many other rabbis. Because he's basically taking a shot at them saying, they ain't not going to bring you rest. But if you come to me instead of them, I'll show you the rest that God promised. So there's going to be some rabbi competition here. Then he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. This is very interesting because the yoke, this giant horseshoe kind of shaped thing that they would put like on oxen, and that would be connected to a cart that they were pulling, or when they were plowing the fields. If whoever made that yoke, they would customize it. Every yoke was custom made for the ox or for whatever it was going to get put on, so that it would fit well and not rub and chafe the skin. But it's just like if you and I put on a backpack today, if we're going to go hiking, I mean like a big backpack where you've got your tent in there and stuff too, and it's a backpack with a frame, and you got to have it sit on your hips right. And if your backpack does not sit on your hips, then all the burden actually goes on your shoulders, and then you have a backache in like 10 minutes. And your shoulders are aching, and you can't really carry that pack very far. But if you get a backpack that fits correctly, then actually instead of the weight being on your shoulders, it just sits right on your hips, and you actually don't notice it. And you can carry that thing all down the Grand Canyon, hiking all day long. That's what we did in Boy Scouts. And so the yoke is kind of like that, where this thing is going to sit on you so well that actually you're not going to notice the burden that you're pulling. That's how these things were made for animals. Jesus is saying, look what he's saying, take my yoke upon you. Wait a minute, the yoke that is custom made for Jesus, so it will fit well just for Jesus. Jesus is saying, take that and put it on you. That means his yoke that's custom made for him is also custom made for us. It's the same yoke. That means Jesus is saying, everything I'm doing you were also made to do. And this yoke that is on me is also made to fit perfectly on you. It's another reason why we can say as disciples, we're supposed to be striving to do what Jesus did. We were made for this. His job was made for us. His yoke is our yoke. There's no pointing the finger and saying, I need a special calling for that, or a special anointing for that, or a special gift for that, or that's only for those clergy people over there, No. If it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for us, every one of us. That's a good point just to soak in. Take my yoke upon you. What do I do with it? Well, he says, learn from me. The learning, and you have to say Hebrew learning, not our learning today. Hebrew learning is you listen to some instruction or you watch somebody do something, and then you immediately go and start doing it. Because then you learn by doing. Okay, show me how you made that. Okay, now I'm going to try to make it. Boy, that looked easier than it actually was. When I watched you do it, that was easier watching you than when I tried to do it. But that's the only way you actually learn. It's not this intellectual learning where we go to school semester after semester after semester and we never get a job and actually try to put that into practice. That is not. That's not even on the radar for Hebrew learning or Hebrew discipleship. The Hebrews and the Israelites that have, if you told them, yeah, I'm going to go to school for 4 years and then I'll get a job, they'd be like, no. Their learning is literally apprenticeship. You show up in the morning, I'll tell you what we're going to do for the day, and then we're going to go do it together, and it's always on-the-job training. Immediately after Jesus calls his disciples, they're working. They're doing prayers, they're baptizing people, they are, watching him bless food, and then they have to pass out the food, and it's multiplying in their hands. Immediately, they're working with him. They weren't this little group that just followed him around and listened to instructions. Oh, we have the greatest teacher. Our teacher's better than your teacher. Well, how would you know if you were actually doing what the teacher did? So we have to shift our mindset, where we are today, and become a Hebrew disciple, an Israelite disciple of Jesus. And that means whatever you learn today, put into practice today. Don't just say, oh, that was a great little insight from Mass, and we'll see what I learned tomorrow. No, you don't actually learn it until you put it into practice. That's how we're made as humans. That's why Hebrews and Israelites, all of their learning was apprenticeship-style learning. The first invitation that Jesus invites us to learn from him is to rest. That means to come and sit still and don't do anything. And this first type of rest is really what we might call self-care. And really what it is letting yourself sit with Jesus and be loved by Jesus. And that can be really hard for many of us today because we're almost trained by the world system to constantly be moving, constantly be thinking, constantly be in motion, constantly be doing something. And we don't really know how to sit down and be loved. I could sit down and do something, but to sit down and the doing is just receiving. Let Jesus love each one of us to fill us up with that rest. Because his first job is to fill us up, to bring healing into any wounds we have, to let us feel safe, and to just commune with him in a relationship. And then when we realize, yep, you're trustworthy and your love is good, and I can commit my life to you, then he says, okay, now I'll put my yoke on you. But the first step is sitting down with him in his presence, giving him time to just love on you. And what you can do is if you sit down with Jesus today, at the end of your time, see if you recognize how he loved on you. If you're not used to sitting still, you might not be able to recognize it because you probably will just fall asleep. So that first part will be learning to just sit still without falling asleep. And just take your time learning that. Because then you'll be able to sit still without falling asleep and then rest, and you'll be consciously aware of his presence. And you might not feel it in the moment, but afterwards you'll be like, well, that was good. Something happened. I can't name it. I don't have a word for it, but something happened. I'm going to try it again tomorrow. And you just do it each day. And after you get enough rest, and he loves on you enough, and you stop being a wiggle worm, then he'll start putting his yoke on you. Okay, go try this today. Go try that today. That's an important order because a lot of times people will say, yep, I want to follow Jesus. Okay, what do I do? Well, the first thing you got to do is sit still. Okay, so when will you carve out time today to just sit still with Jesus and let him love on you and show you, not tell you, but show you experientially this rest that he's talking about?